Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for their time and attention. We do have a sheet that's been passed out that kind of more sensibly organizes some of the things that we discussed categorically in our last conference committee. So I will turn to Eddie. There are a few additions. As you look down through that list, there's some italicized type. I'll let Eddie go ahead and respond to those and explain what was done there.
Right. I'll start with the income tax. It's just organized as was. There's one addition at the bottom that says HB 2797 HPIP transferability. That is in error. The House chair asked me to add a bill, and he and I got crossways on which bill number he wanted added, and he actually intended me to add HB 2832, which provides for transferability of the housing investor tax credits in the year in which the credit was issued. That credit is otherwise transferable in all other years, but not in that particular year. And so once I get this updated in the next edition, that will show that that does not have a fiscal impact, and that those negative numbers out there to the right will be gone. There were no italicized additions to the property tax. The italics are the ones that are not conferenceable in terms of that particular bill, but they're conferenceable by virtue of the topic of tax. However, there is one in the property tax at the bottom that was conferenceable by the passage of the bill, and I inadvertently omitted it on the previous version of this, and that is Senate Bill 55, or substitute for Senate Bill 55, which provides for some changes to the property tax exemption for Strother Field Airport. I apologize for not including that previously. That was just an oversight on my part. If you look at the sales tax section, we have, I believe, 5 down at the bottom that are in italics that are new. The first of those is the contents of HB 2773, a sales tax exemption for the Boys and Girls Club of Topeka. The next is HB 2041, a sales tax exemption for nonprofit community theaters. The third, HB 2794, a sales tax exemption for animal shelters and rescue network managers. The fourth, we don't actually have a specific bill version, but a sales tax exemption for Friends of Cedar Crest. That is something that had been discussed in testimony in front of the House Tax Committee on other sales tax exemption bills.
So, Eddie, is that an extension of an existing program, or is that a new?
Staff was actually just discussing that. I believe it was in 2021 you passed an income tax credit for contributions to the Friends of Cedar Crest, but there's no sales tax provision as it relates to that entity.
And when does the income tax provision sunset, or does it?
I believe it does, and I think Amelia and Adam are gonna check really quickly on that. I think it was a 5-year program, and you enacted it, I wanna say, in the 21 session, but in terms of the actual specific tax years, we'll get that in just a second. And then the last item there is SB 537, Neosho County Sales Tax Authority. Of those that had a fiscal impact, I put what it is down there. The Boys and Girls Club is just a 1-year impact, and then nothing in the out years. Animal shelters and rescue network managers, we have the numbers. I put pending on 2041 because I had to confirm with the Department of Revenue, but it is the same fiscal note from last year, but just shifted forward 1 year. And then the Department of Revenue is going to be in the process of reaching out to the Friends of Cedar Crest, probably shortly following the culmination of this meeting, as I think they found out about this this need for a fiscal impact on this shortly before this meeting, in between the two meetings. So that'll be pending, but we will have the 2041 numbers the next time you convene. And then the last section there is just the other items that you had discussed that you wanted to keep separate from the income, property, and sales tax sections. So I would, if there are any questions on this, be happy to do my best to answer them, but I think at this point you know all that I know about it.
Well, first of all, congratulations for getting it all on one page. I don't know if we have much room for anything else. And Eddie was very kind on that error up on the income tax piece. He did exactly what I asked him to do, and I was incorrect. So we will try to get the correct bill put in there. But as Eddie had said, the House Bill 2832 had no fiscal impact. It's actually just a technical correction to kind of confirm the legislative intent. There's some of these things that are expiring. We can go into detail with that if you want to take a look at that, but.
Mr. Chair, we did just get confirmation that the Friends of Cedar Crest tax credit is tax years 21 through 25 is the tax years for which the credit is available for contributions to Friends of Cedar Crest.
Okay, Madam Chair, when we adjourned, I went back and met with the speaker and made the request for 4 additional bills. That request seemed to be met favorably, so it sounds like we might have 4 additional bills coming. Not at this time. The House is adjourned, so hopefully they can reappoint some conferees, either Senate bills or House bills, whatever we have out there. But if we want to move forward under the assumption that we've got a total of 6 bills in conference, I'd be willing to
That would be
start
great,
working.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
Okay, just for the sake of simplicity, do you want to go ahead and take a look at the other items there on the bottom, the one bill that we want to kind of keep everything together on with Senate Bill 498 and the contents of 2757?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping that would be where you'd start, so that's
Okay.
great.
I do want to make sure the Senate is completely aware of, because I think you passed a similar adoption savings account bill. The House did make some changes, and I was going to see if the revisers would be willing to cover the amendments that were made in the House committee on House Bill 2757.
Yes, that would be great. And if we could also go over the details of those other 2, just to make sure that we're, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're referring to 2757, is that correct? The changes that were made
Yes,
on
I
the
was
House
just
side?
going to see if, I wanted to make sure see if the Senate had any questions on the changes that the House had made in committee on that 2757 language.
Okay. If I remember correctly, both sides introduced identical bills originally. They should have been introduced to match, but then changes were made, I believe, in both committees. The House committee made changes essentially doubling the amounts for the contributions, for the amount in the allowed to be in the account. So the maximum contribution would be $6,000 for an individual and $12,000 for a married couple. Those were increased from $3,000 to $6,000 per year. The maximum amount of contributions was increased from 24 to 48 for an individual and from 48 to 96 for a married couple filing a joint return. The total amount in the account was increased from 50,000 to 100,000. And then the tax component, the contribution eligible for deduction, subtraction, modification was increased from 3,000 and 6,000 for an individual and married to 6,000 and 12,000. So they were doubled. This has the component also where it could be either that amount or the amount received as income earned from assets, but that was standard in the bill. There was provisions in the bill that were requiring reference to the child in this state. The in this state was removed. It was a little bit kind of tightened it up and clarified that that's not required. So the adoption is not required to be for a child in the state. There was kind of a technical correction dealing with the CDs and designated beneficiary. So there's an exception for when opening a certificate of deposit. I believe that was a technical correction offered by maybe the treasurer. I believe that was it. Was there anything else?
So could you go over the changes that the Senate had so that we have the differences? Since we did start with the same language, we did end up with a little bit of difference.
Mr. Chairman, yes. The changes that were just described on the House side, the Senate made similar changes and made one additional clarification relating to certificates of deposit, that monies in an adoption savings account may be invested in certificates of deposit that are adoption savings accounts. But otherwise, the language, I believe, was either identical or very, very similar.
And if I may, we both landed on that the adoption itself can be international.
The Senate also removed those in this state references as the House did.
So does staff need any further clarification? It sounds like maybe they were very, very similar, but not exactly identical. Is there any clarification you need from the conference committee to adopt any differences?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that the main difference, or the only difference, was the CD, that we clarified the language on that. That would be the only difference.
And it's our understanding from our hearing and our changes, we fully intended that as well, so I would think that that language would be acceptable with our side. I mean, ultimately, we want these accounts to be able to be in a growth fund to where if they're putting money away, we do allow them to realize a little bit of growth on that and to have that money reinvested back into the account. So is there any further instruction you need from the committee on what language to adopt?
I guess the only, if you choose to come to an agreement, which version you would like, if you'd like to, essentially the additional provision that the Senate added, allowing monies to be invested in certificates of deposit, opened and designated as adoption savings accounts. That was kind of the additional provision the Senate adopted. So that's essentially the only additional provision we would need to clarify on which way you would want to go.
Yeah, we'll accept the Senate language then from that provision. Okay. And do you want to have Amelia go over the provisions of the other piece, or whoever would be most comfortable with going over Senate Bill 498? By the way, Madam Chair, I'm going to take this time to give a shout out to our amazing staff. They do great work on both sides of the legislative bodies, so I know I could not do my job without them, and we put a lot of pressure on them sometimes with some great ideas that we have, and they make it happen. So I definitely want to thank our research and revisers for everything they do.
Mr. Chairman, I would echo those comments. I would not want to try to do this job without them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 498, as amended by Senate Committee, related to income privilege and premium tax credits, and it establishes a tax credit for contributions to eligible charitable organizations operating pregnancy centers or residential maternity facilities. It would also provide a sales tax exemption for purchases by pregnancy resource centers and residential maternity facilities. It would also increase the existing tax credit amount for adoption expenses, and it would make that credit refundable. The original bill established a child tax credit, but that was not in the amended version that passed the Senate chamber.
Regarding the tax credit, is that, see, we have the adoption tax credit, and then we have the pregnancy. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of it in front of me. I should have brought my laptop, but it's increased from what percentage?
The adoption tax credit that is in Senate Bill 498 The adoption tax credit currently is there's different provisions that are 25%, and then there may be another 25% depending on qualifications of the adoption. The tax credit amendment here would make that credit equal to 100% of the federal credit. And it would make the credit currently, the credit is, I believe, a carry forward credit, and it would make it fully refundable.
Okay. But this still is a tax credit. They have to have the actual expenses. I mean, it's at the federal level, it's a tax credit for whatever these adoption costs were. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe they're tied to their definition of qualified expenses, and then I believe there are some limitations. And as well, there may even be income limitations at some point where it phases out.
Okay. And then for the Pregnancy Resource Centers tax credit, would you mind detailing that, please? I think this is similar to the bill that we had in the House. I just wanted to make sure that we're the same on some of these numbers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you're looking at it in this kind of detail, so thank you.
Relating to the pregnancy resource centers, it is a new income privilege or premium tax liability tax credit, and it would be equal to, the amount of the credit would be equal to 70% of the amount contributed during the tax year to an eligible charitable organization. And then there's a definition of eligible charitable organization in the provision of the bill.
Is there a cap or a limit on this?
Yes, there is. There is a cap for a single eligible charitable organization. The total amount of credits for a single eligible charitable organization shall not exceed $5 million per year. And then the aggregate amount of credits claimed pursuant to the section shall not exceed $10 million per year.
Okay, that accounts for kind of the flat or the stable fiscal note throughout the different years. Okay. Okay, Madam Chair, I don't think we have any further questions. If there's anything the Senate had on that, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, so, okay.
Mr. Chairman, it is a Senate position, so we would entertain any offers that you guys have on this.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. If you don't mind breaking for maybe 5 minutes, we'll discuss this and see if there's anything else we want to include or add into this and let you know.
Maybe they caught it.
I think we'll go ahead and get called back to order here. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We had some discussion over some of the federal limitations on the adoption tax credit, and I might see if Eddie would be willing to review that. I was thinking there were some caps. Representative Bergkamp was doing some research with his laptop, trying to answer those questions. I might turn to Eddie for just a moment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The federal adoption tax credit, and this is the 2023 number. I'm sure the 2024 number is a few percentage points higher, but it was capped at $15,950 per adopted child. So if multiple children were adopted, it could be higher. And the fees that are qualified adoption expenses are reasonable and necessary adoption fees, court costs and attorney fees, traveling expenses, which includes amounts spent for meals and lodging while away from home, and then kind of the other expenses directly related to and for the principal purpose of the legal adoption of the other child. And as I think it was Amelia, it might have been Adam, I apologize, mentioned that at the federal level, it does actually phase out at higher income levels. And so if your federal modified adjusted gross income is above about 280,000, then you aren't eligible for the credit at all. And then this phase out starts at about $240,000. And so it slides downwards across that amount. So that's kind of the federal provisions of it.
Okay, thank you for that. I know that's one thing we discussed, trying to figure out exactly how all this would work. So at the federal level, yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is obviously the actual expenses associated with adoption might straddle multiple tax years. And so the federal law does include drawdown provisions. If you use a part of it in one year, but your adoption doesn't conclude until the following year, you can't double dip, so to speak. You reduce the cap on it for the second year based upon the amount of it that you used in the first year.
Okay, that was going to be my next question with the carry forward provision. Does it accumulate, or you're still limited to that threshold limitation, even if it spans multiple years?
So at the federal level, you're still limited to the cap, even if it spans multiple years, and the cap is just reduced by whatever amount of the credit you have used in preceding years.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think it was the House provision that had the carry forward. Is that?
I believe current
No,
law.
Current
law has a carry forward.
Yeah, I didn't mean
as it
House. I
relates
meant
to.
current law has the carry forward. And we would be exchanging that for refundable.
And at the federal level, it is a non-refundable credit, but does allow for a carry forward.
So current law mimics the federal, and the Senate changed it in this legislation.
Would you mind explaining that? Because that was one of the conversations we had, was keeping it tied, not necessarily coupled to the federal, but keeping that carry forward provision, but making it non-refundable. Could you maybe give us some of the reasoning you had for changing that?
Yes, I can defend that since it was a Senate position. The thought process was that not all families have that large of a tax liability, and they wanted them to feel the benefit of this program in the year that they actually adopted the child, is why they were looking for the refundability. That's why it got changed.
Is there any, I might turn to staff, is there any complications that creates, making it refundable at the federal level or carry forward at the federal level and refundable at the state level for the out years if they carry forward on their federal taxes?
It would probably be prudent of me to confirm with the Department of Revenue before answering this, but I don't anticipate that there would be. And Kathleen is shaking her head no. So the shorter answer is no.
Okay. Madam Chair, I think when we had our discussion, that was the one thing that we wanted to offer back, is to try to tie that and mirror that with the federal. Completely understand the arguments to make that refundable instead of carry forward. If they have expenses immediately, it does provide a pretty significant, or it could potentially provide a pretty significant refund that would help out with those expenses, but we just did prefer to keep it tied to the federal carry forward.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to understand, you would accept the 100% position, but you're asking that the carry forward
Yes.
instead of, okay. Okay, did you have any other changes on the, so Senator Holland has a question on this before we go any further.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for not bringing this up sooner. But I guess the question, I want to confirm, because in my mind, the beneficiary of these programs, being it the families or whatever, I'm reading these as that they don't even have to be Kansas citizens to benefit financially from these. They just need to have a Kansas tax liability. Would that be your understanding of these programs? Because I'm not aware of any requirements saying this is only open to Kansas citizens.
Yeah, I might turn to the revisers to make sure, to answer that question exactly.
For clarification, we need to go to which provisions we're looking at. If we're talking about the existing adoption tax credit that has the 25, 25, 25%, that one is a credit against the tax liability of a resident individual. So that is a Kansas resident. Okay, so the current adoption tax credit is a Kansas resident. If we're also looking within Senate Bill 498 at the new tax credits for the eligible charitable organizations contributions, let me find the provision. Sorry. It is a credit against the tax liability imposed upon a taxpayer. So it's somebody who has a taxpayer with an income privilege or premium tax liability in Kansas. I believe they're, within their definitions, I believe it's been when we look at the definitions of eligible charitable organization for that contribution credit, it does appear that there are some requirements that it be a nonprofit organization organized under the laws of this state. And I believe that it maintains, am I reading that right? It maintains its primary physical office, clinic, or residential home. Oh, no, sorry. In Kansas? Yeah, based in the state.
I wasn't concerned about the PRA. I was talking about the
Adoption savings.
as far as the adoption savings and adoption tax credit.
So you stated that the current law specifies that they must be a resident. Is the new law, I mean, Senate Bill 498 would continue that requirement. There's nothing that would strike that residential requirement?
In the adoption tax credit, no,
yes.
that remains the same. There's no
Okay.
change to that residential, or resident individual requirement. If you're looking at and then the last provision we were talking about is the new adoption savings account program. If we are looking at tax implications, we're really talking about the subtraction modification. And I believe the subtraction modifications are simply a taxpayer that may have a Kansas obligation.
I may, Mr. Chairman, if we could, I don't know that we need any changes, but I'd like to digest it a couple of minutes, if that's okay, and digest your offer on the refundable versus the carry forward. We need to visit about that. Okay, thank you. We just want to make sure there's clarification on the carry forward. It's until it's used up, correct? There's no sunset on it. Okay.
Yes, that would be our intent if that's the way the policy could be written.
So-
Or what does the current law state? Does it ever expire? Sometimes we have, the feds does. Oh,
I can tell you, I'm looking at the current adoption tax credit, and it provides that the tax credits may be carried over until the total amount of the credits have been deducted from tax liability, so until they are used. That's the state tax credit.
The federal credit does, the carry forward expires at 5 years, but that doesn't impact their ability to avail themselves of the state one. They can continue carrying forward unused state credit even after their federal one has run through the 5 years if they have it, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, We do know it's a Senate position on the refundability and that you guys have asked for the carry forward, and we have a lot of negotiations to go. So we are going to accept your offer with 100% and the other provisions in the bill. Thank you.
Now we got that part done. I do not like the 70% tax credit for the PRA, so, yeah, so probably need to do an agree to disagree.
Well, do you want to make an offer?
I'll offer 50, but I would sign it at 50, but I still won't vote for it if that's. Yeah, I'm not going to vote for it regardless, so.
And I suppose we need to, if we want to move on this, if we need to do an agree to disagree, we probably need to decide which bill. We've got 2036 and 2465 at the moment, anticipating some others to come in, but do you have a preference on which bill we put that in? We could put it in 2465 and move forward with the agree to disagree, and then we'll have to probably come back tomorrow, because are you guys recessed or adjourned?
We're adjourned at 4.
Okay.
Are you guys recessed? or
We're
adjourned?
adjourned for the day.
Oh, so we won't get any other vehicles today. We were hoping we could finish up today.
Okay.
I guess that's not going to happen. I'm always the optimist. Okay, well, let's just say, oh, you want it for them to go ahead and write it. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, if we could go ahead and get the agree to disagree done.
Yeah, I just don't want
and-
people to think that's, I mean, I know it's a priority, it's important, but we have many tax bills that are important to those.
Right.
Yeah, so, yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be fine.
Okay.
Under the condition that if we don't get any other vehicles, we know we'll be changing this one.
Certainly,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Not my intention to walk out of here and leaving anything on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Yes, 2465 will be the bill for this report.
So do you want to go for a second one?
Yeah, you guys have to be in at 4, so if, however,
They told us not to come back.
Oh.
They're just going to adjourn without us.
okay. I didn't know if you had any final action or anything you needed to go over. Okay. 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 Madam Chair, I might defer to your wisdom, but if we do get that fourth bill to kind of put some administrative language in, kind of some of the technical pieces, is there anything that you would, out of either one of these categories, that you would consider more technical or administrative in nature that would be either low fiscal impact or non-controversial?
So thank you for asking, Mr. Chairman. I think there's quite a few provisions in this that could be considered non-controversial. I'm not sure, I guess you're forever the optimist thinking that we'll get 4 bills, but how about we just pick one of the other income, property, or sales tax and just try tackling that bill? Would that be okay?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Easiest might be the biggest one there, or maybe it looks like it's the biggest, but the sales tax pieces, where we don't really have a vehicle yet. I don't know who wants to make the first offer or what we want to do, but
So, Mr. Chairman, I do have some provisions that I would like to see in the bill. Could we just go over those real quick?
Absolutely.
And it's not just me, it's others too. So, so the provision of the custom meat processing sales tax, the school for the blind and deaf, the doorstep, the exploration, actually, well, let me just go with the big ones first, instead of trying to pick all these smaller ones. You know what, Mr. Chairman, I think it might be better if we take a minute and look at these and see what you guys want, because almost all of these provisions pass the Senate, and so I'm going to have to try to defend as much as I can, obviously.
Yeah, don't want
So,
you to have to negotiate against
Yeah, I'm sitting here
yourself.
reading, yeah, and I'm like, oh, these are the Senate positions, so yeah. yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I might see if perhaps research or the revisers would be willing to kind of identify some of the ones that in italics that did not pass the House, just in case you have any questions on either one. Some of those have some expiration dates, some of them don't. I don't know if Mr. Siebers, if you're prepared to kind of explain those sales tax exemptions that were added there in 2773, 2041, 2794, and then that Friends of Cedar Crest. I believe on the Cedar Crest, we had some language, when we had our hearing on the 501c3, kind of the broad umbrella exemptions, Friends of Cedar Crest submitted supportive testimony for that, but they said if this one does not look like it's going forward, they wanted to have their own bill introduced and make that request. I was thinking that they included that, their language as part of their testimony, but we might have to get a draft on that if I'm remembering incorrectly, but we just never had time because we moved forward with the 501c3 total exemption, and then we found some issues with that and didn't have time to move forward with their bill for Cedar Crest.
Okay.
But I tried to filibuster for a little bit to give Adam some time, but
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, starting with 2773, which is the Boys and Girls Club of Topeka. This would be a sales tax exemption that would apply for personal property or services purchased by the Boys and Girls Club of Topeka for the purpose of constructing, equipping, reconstructing, maintaining, and repairing, enlarging, furnishing, or remodeling a workforce readiness and career development center for middle school and high school students. Additionally, there would be a sales tax exemption for tangible personal property and services purchased by a contractor for essentially the same purpose for constructing, remodeling such facility. So essentially, we have the sales tax exemption would be purchases made by the entity and construction, sales tax exemption for construction purposes for this entity. Under House Bill 2041, this was a bill from 2023 dealing with not-for-profit corporation operating a community theater. Excuse me, going back, the first bill did not have any sort of expiration date, so that would be go on in perpetuity. Under House Bill 2041 would be sales of tangible personal property purchased by a not-for-profit corporation exempt from income tax that operates a theater in the state of Kansas that provides certain qualifiers. And these would be the creation and production of novel works for concerts or productions, the employment of full-time theater staff, a board of directors, and governance of the organization that provides a partnership between the board and theater staff and a connection to the community by ensuring sound business and financial practices and a commitment to bringing new thoughts and ideas to the governance of the organization, the dedication to providing strong educational commitments to the community in which such theater is located, and the commitment to providing ongoing live theater as an art form using available resources. This one also does not have any sort of expiration date, so it would go on in perpetuity. The last one, let me pull up here, is the sales tax exemption for animal shelters and rescue network managers under 2794. And this one has kind of, I think, the couple sales tax exemptions tied to it. This one has sales tax exemption for purchases made by on behalf of a non-for-profit organization that is an animal shelter or a rescue network manager. So the purchases made by these entities. There would also be a sales tax exemption for contractors for the purpose of constructing, equipping, reconstructing facilities of a animal shelter. So that would not include the rescue managers. And lastly, there's also, I defined it, there is a sales tax exemption for sales made by these two entities for tangible personal property or entry or participation fees or charges when such sales are made by or on behalf of the animal shelter or rescue network manager. And this one also does not have a expiration provision, so it would go on in perpetuity also.
Madam Chair, I know we kind of threw a lot of these at you, so I completely respect if you want to take some time and discuss these or think about them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we do need a little bit of time. I know there's some that we can absolutely agree on and sign off on, but some of these, well, I've talked to my leadership and they have some concern over. So I just going to be very candid.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And completely respect that. Probably the same way on some that you're offering to, as it always happens with
yeah.
sales tax exemptions. One that I really apologize, I completely forgot. I can't believe I forgot it, but it's a bill that we passed out of committee. It is a sales tax exemption. It was scheduled to go above the line and it got pulled. That's House Bill 2662. It was a sales tax exemption for the Kansas State Fair Foundation. They are building a building for the state fairgrounds. It's a really unique situation where the foundation funds, all that money is donated by private citizens. They do a lot of good work for the state fair. They're building a pavilion down there to host some events and try to provide a source of income. The building, once it's built, actually becomes state fair or state property. So they're paying sales tax. They already have a sales tax exemption, but as I'm sure you're familiar, that's just on purchases. It can't be on any buildings that they construct. I can't remember what the fiscal note was on that, but that's one I meant to include, and I apologize. I forgot to put that one on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a good thing we're going over these. We may have to come back to the sales tax if that's okay. Yeah. Did you have anything else on here that?
I don't think so. Nothing that came to mind. I think if it's not too premature, I think one that we are fairly consistent on. I know it's in Senate Bill 60. I think something that we could agree on right now is the custom meat processing services, the exploration place, and the Children's Discovery Center. Those are three that we did not have a hearing on the custom meat processing services, but I'm very familiar with the situation there. I would consider that as a accepted position on those three items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know for your district, which I have called home before, most people wouldn't realize that, but I did used to live out in that area. It would be a big benefit for rural Kansas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And also, if it's not premature, I would like to make the offer for the telecommunications infrastructure. It's probably one of the larger fiscal notes of this piece, but these folks have been working on this bill for a number of years. It's passed in Senate Bill 8. It's passed multiple times. I'd like to get them across the board this year if we can.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we should ask them to hold out another year. No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing. Yes, we will accept that. And I would ask if we could agree on the manufacturer's coupons too. I know that was in CCR 8 last year also.
Yes, Madam Chair, we'd accept that position. Madam Chair, if you or staff would be willing to just explain a little bit what the Johnson County Christmas Bureau Association is and Doorstep, and perhaps the Schools for the Deaf and Blind Habitation. We didn't have a chance to hear those. If you'd just give us a brief summary on what those organizations were.
The state schools for the deaf and the blind one is the one of those I'll start with. There's relatively few instances in which educational institutions pay sales tax, but one of those is on construction of buildings specifically for human habitation. And you might recall a couple of years ago that we carved out for that related to, I believe it was the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation of Kansas. This would be basically an additional carve out for the state schools for the deaf and the state school for the deaf and the state school for the blind on that topic. So there's an exemption and then an exclusion to the exemption. This would be an exception to the exclusion to the exemption. That's what it is on the state schools for the deaf and the blind. Think that Amelia is trying to track down exactly what it is that Johnson County Christmas Bureau Association and Doorstep, they're both charitable organizations. In terms of exactly what they do, I think Amelia is pulling up the testimony maybe from the hearings.
I'm actually looking at the language in Senate Bill 60 and trying to recall some of the testimony. The Johnson County Christmas Bureau Association was a 501c3 organization out of Johnson County that provides food, clothing, cleaning supplies, personal care items, and other necessities to those in need and desiring assistance. I believe, if I recall correctly, some of the testimony was that they have provide the ability for those in need to come do some, free Christmas shopping for their families and that type of activity. And currently, they're paying sales tax on their purchases for those items that they give away. And I believe this particular exemption also, the sales tax exemption also includes an exemption for sales of tangible personal property by or on behalf of such organization. And then relating to Doorstep, this would be a sales tax exemption for tangible personal property and services purchased by or on behalf of Doorstep, which again is a 501c3 exempt organization that provides short-term emergency aid to families and individuals in need, including assistance with food, clothing, rent, prescription medications, transportation, and utilities, and provides information on services to promote long-term self-sufficiency.
Back on the school for the blind and deaf, that doesn't have any, or the fiscal notes listed at zero. Do they not anticipate any projects upcoming, or is it the fiscal note just that small?
So yeah, there's several of these where it's a negative zero there. That is where it does not round to, where the rounding of it rounds below $1/10,000,000. So it's less than $50,000 per year. So if it shows a negative zero, that's what it means in all of those instances. I could find exactly what that number is for each of those, but
No, that's fine. I think we're good on that.
okay.
Madam Chair, I'd go ahead and make the offer to accept the Senate's position for the state schools for the blind and deaf. This time, we would not accept the Johnson County Christmas Bureau or the doorstep.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're going to hold off on negotiating any more of this. I am in complete agreement so far. And I would just like to take a step back and make sure of what we're looking at. The other thing is, we would ask that you consider the other provisions in here. Yeah, and we'll take a look at the ones that you've added too, if that's okay. Gives us time to go back and look at what the programs actually are. Okay, thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, then I think this is very helpful, and then we could take a step, look at the others in the same manner.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty good job going through those, maybe identifying some of the priorities, and then we can kind of fine tune it tomorrow. If you want to, we can go ahead and take a look at property tax now.
Yes.
Okay.
And do you want to wait till tomorrow so that we know how many vehicles we have, or would that be the
Yeah,
thought process? Because I thought it was going to be a late night. I warned everybody. So,
Yeah, I don't think we want to finalize anything until we know exactly how many bills we have, because we might need to come back and hopefully not, but lump some together if we don't get all 4 vehicles. I guess looking at the property tax pieces, if I was to go through here and kind of name some of the top priorities, I'll start with the golden years homestead refund changes. I will be the first to say I agree we need to change the name, because right now in statute it's kind of confusing. It's other than the Social Security questions that I get on income tax. This is probably the one big thing that I get a lot of calls. What's this new program? How do I apply for it? Which form is it? What's it called? I'm completely acceptable to getting the name changed to what whatever it needs to be. I have no problem with golden years, just so people can identify it and understand the program that they're qualifying for. Jury's still out. That's a fairly high fiscal note. Do you remember, or maybe staff can tell me, what limits did you change on that, adjusting the current program?
so I can tell you, but what I would like them to do, if they could, is do a comparison of where we were at on CCR 8 versus, or maybe not. Let's just look at where we're at in the Senate. We had so many versions of this. It was unbelievable. So, yeah, thank you.
Yes, Amelia.
I am looking at House Bill 2465 as amended by the Senate Committee of the Whole, is where I'm getting this information. Relating to this, one was the name change, but then relating to, or adding a name, looking at the provisions themselves, it would exclude Social Security from the definition of household income. I found it. Then it would also increase the threshold for the claimant's household income from $50,000 to $80,000. The appraised value of the claimant's homestead for the base year would increase from $350,000 to $595,000 or less. The bill would also add an annual adjustment to the upper limit appraised valuation threshold after the first base year. And it would also, the provisions would apply retroactively and provide an extension for claimants to file a claim on or before April 15 of 2025 for the prior years that the time would otherwise be passed.
I'm sorry, did I hear you, was it 350,000 to 590 or 595?
595.
595, okay. I apologize, I didn't.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of Johnson County and Sedgwick County on our committee. That's how it got to 595, so.
Okay. And was that was an amendment on the floor? Or was that's how it came out of committee?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we did have a version out of, that did not, we did not work it out of committee. It was an amendment on the floor.
Okay.
Yes. We had two bills that we were working on this, and we chose not to move on it. Instead, it was an amendment on the floor.
Okay. Yeah, one of the pieces that when I take a step back and look at the overall picture of what we're doing with all of our tax policy is, the tax package that we're kind of working on as far as the comprehensive tax relief. We're putting a lot of money on that Social Security exemption piece. There's a lot of tax relief going to a lot of those folks. Not saying it's one for one, but a lot of those folks are probably the ones that would qualify for these programs here. So I'm a little hesitant to accept the increases. Maybe we can continue to negotiate on that, but still think that, yeah, we need to identify the program with a name so it's identifiable and easier to use for our taxpayers, though.
So we'll take a look at it, Mr. Chairman, and try to come back with an offer, if that would be okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So we actually passed similar legislation in CCR 8 last year, but that's why I didn't know if we'll save those provisions for another day. We'll take a look at those, do a comparison, and come back with an offer.
Sure. Yes, I completely respect that. I do remember that. We did have that in Senate Bill 8 last year.
I think the difference was just the income level. Yeah, that's one thing.
Okay. Madam Chair, from the House's position, I know House Bill 2609, the electric generation, kind of the uniformity there, that's something that we didn't really even realize was an issue in tax committee. Like I said, this was a utilities bill. When it was identified and the bill was brought forward, they didn't have time and utilities to work this, but it's a bill that really does make sense. We're trying to just keep the playing field level across all of electrical generation, whether it's gas, coal-fired, wind energy, whatever might be coming, or whatever type of electrical generation there is. I would ask the Senate I know that's a bill that we didn't get over to you in time for you to really hear, but I would encourage you to look at that and see what your position on that might be.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll read through the legislation and get back with you on that. So do you want to look at some of these smaller ones, like the BOTA small claims teleconferencing? I think that's
Yeah, as I'm looking through those, that's almost one of those that I'd almost consider kind of one of those administrative. It's, trust me, as somebody that lives in Wallace County, I'd love to have the ability to connect with my state officials. Back when I was a county commissioner, we didn't have virtual testimony. It would have saved me a lot of time and mileage coming back and forth in Topeka. I think that one's a pretty easy one. Just, I guess I'm curious whether or not we find out what bills we have, because I'd almost see that one as a non-controversial one that we could put in an administrative bill or language. Also, with regards to the revenue neutral rate pieces, I don't know that there's any there that would be kind of non-administrative. With regards to Senate Bill 495, changes required to the notice form, would you mind explaining that? Because we had a bill in House committee that we heard, and I can't remember if we worked it or not, but it had to do with requiring rather than a format provided, it was an actual form that was provided. do you remember what 485 specifically did?
I do,
Or Eddie?
oh,
Maybe
Eddie,
can do
that's
that.
fine.
No,
Yes.
the only thing I want to clarify there is, it is apparent that I used
Typo.
a drag and drop formula in Excel there because 40, all of those four in sequence there, 482 through 485, those are all actually provisions in 482. That's why 484 above where it appears as the personal property tax exemption, that is 484, but everything down there below is 482, and that's a typo on my part, sorry.
So the required notice is the one you were asking? Those are all provisions from last year. I'll let Eddie and Amelia go over. There was only one change that we had this year. Oh, no, I take that back. I'm sorry, I was asleep at the wheel here. So I had a county clerk reach out to me on the first one, exempting the mailing. They would like to not be required to mail the notice to anybody that does not pay property taxes. And so I told the clerk I would introduce the bill and we would work on that. The next one was the governing body has to vote on the same day. We just wanted clarification. We heard that that had gotten taken to BOTA this year. And BOTA had ruled on the same day, but we just want to make sure that there's no ambiguity in that language at all. The final valuation reduction exemption was, I'm not sure what that language was. I'm sorry, I should.
I think that was if, whatever the revenue neutral rate, if I remember
Oh,
Eddie's
yes, it was
description,
giving
if
them
it
leeway.
changes.
Yes. Okay, so, thank you. You know better than, so what that was brought to us by a former senator who is on a community college board. And they exceeded revenue neutral for 1/10 of a point because they were afraid that their valuations would come in actually lower and they needed a certain dollar amount. So what we did is clarify the language that the estimated valuation is what their revenue neutral rate would be based off of. So if those valuations fluctuate up or down, we're giving them the leeway that they actually know. So I think more governing bodies will come in revenue neutral as a result of that. I know my home county did the same thing this year, and they ended up staying neutral. I'm sorry, Amelia, did you want to add to that? I didn't mean to. And then changes to the request notice, that's the stuff that was in CCR 8 last year. Yeah. And then the printing and postage reimbursement, that was from CCR 8 last year also. So I don't know if you want to keep that in or not, but.
Yes, I think we wanted to continue that offer. That was a House position to kind of help reimburse those costs. One of the things, the bill, and I can't remember the number exactly that we had in the House, but the bill that we had wanted to provide some consistency where the form that was it the Director of Accounts and Reports that creates that form? They wanted it to actually be a state form, so it's consistent. If you own property in two different counties, you're getting two different notices. They wanted them to be more uniform and similar. We had some questions about that, if it's an actual paper tangible product that now the state needs to provide counties, are there going to be some issues trying to provide that, or if it's just maybe an electronic, like a PDF form. But we want to try to make these things consistent because as I'm sure you've probably seen, there's a variety of formats of these, and if you get used to reading one, you're okay, but if you're getting multiple forms, sometimes it's hard to decipher the information on those.
No, Mr. Chairman, we've experienced that. I've had many family members. You can get them from pink to blue to yellow to ad valorem to proposed property tax increase on the title. I mean, it is across the board. And I think the language that we did in CCR 8 would help with that, but if you want to take a deeper, closer look at that and make sure that there aren't more changes that you'd like to see, that's fine. I like the idea of the consistency across the counties.
Yes, I certainly think it's a good idea to standardize that. What I didn't want to run into is a situation where the state is responsible for providing these forms to the counties or whatever the local government entity is, and then there's a disconnect there. They don't get them printed or they don't get them sent out. The county or the city or whoever is trying to do this, but they don't actually have the form. So if we can see if we can produce that electronically so they just have it, understanding also that it has to work with their vendor software to produce these forms as well. But I'd like to see where we could go with that to try to standardize it.
That would be fine, and I have to compliment the Department of Administration, the Division of Accounts and Reporting. They, actually, the Secretary of Administration has been excellent working on this issue. He's brought everybody in and tried to get a uniform form that everybody could live with. So, yeah, if you'd want to take a look at that language and see, because we did have quite a bit in there that would help create some consistency. We still wanted the flexibility that it be the county's form, so that if they see something that they need to add to it or, but we do need some consistency across. I know exactly what you're saying on the wordage and that. I think the program, I know I've heard some complaints, but I hear more compliments than complaints at this point, once people start to figure out what it is, Mr. Chairman. But, yeah, if you're good with those provisions, no, why don't you take a look at it and see if there's something you want to change in it?
Yeah, I'll definitely review what we had in Senate Bill 8 and see if that maybe alleviates the concern and maybe takes a step forward.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I did want to bring, again, it's something that we passed in Senate Bill 8, but that agritourism land classification, I want to make that a very high priority. That's something that's impacting people, has been for the last several years, and we've got to get that passed. I would like to put that, if we can, and maybe if we get the administrative bill, that's kind of it's a policy change, but it's one that I think is fairly non-controversial. We're just trying to codify in statute what needs to happen there with the agritourism, the ag land being valued at commercial rates. I'm thinking after the hearings and everything that we've had on these, I think the situation is less, but I think we still need it in statute to provide proper directive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would agree with that. And I would ask also that you would, the agriculture land adverse influence, we also had that in CCR 8.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. I know we did have a hearing on that in House Tax this year, so we did have a chance to kind of ask questions and take a look at that.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I just want to be sure, on the agritourism land classification changes, is that the one specifically about the farm wineries?
It's ag in general.
But, okay, I have a farm winery. I would have a conflict. I would need to basically step back from that package. That would be so.
Certainly. Yeah, I certainly respect that. Madam Chair, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around here, but I skipped the personal property filings changes. That's one I think is fairly non-controversial. We're certainly willing to get that one through as well. It's right above that agritourism.
Senate Bill 484.
The personal property filing changes, it was the renditions, yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. We would ask that you would consider Senate Bill 484. And I do have a question on it, if I may. on Senate Bill 484, are they still required to register, or there are other taxes that they have to pay? I know sales tax, but this just removes the ad valorem, or personal property tax, correct?
This particular bill only addressed property tax. It did not address registration and things like that.
I just wanted to clarify so that everybody knew, and we were all on the same page. So, thank you. If you guys would entertain that, that'd be great, too.
Yeah, we'll certainly take that one into consideration. We had a constitutional amendment, a resolution that we heard, I think, that was just reducing, was it exempting or was it reducing the assessment rate on those? But I think this would probably be a lot cleaner if it just was a full exemption.
Yeah, and the history on this bill is, you may already know, but the County Appraisers Association came to me on this and asked for the legislation. And I started, so I went around and talked to some of my local county treasurer and others, and they said, oh, that would be wonderful if you would do that, that it would help, that it's more of a burden to try to collect the taxes on these. They spend more money than they actually collect. So I told them I'd be glad to lower taxes.
Well, and I'm sure that you heard the same thing that we did in our hearing is, you know, a lot of these people don't even bring these in. They don't put them on their personal property tax rendition sheet. They don't, they have to usually go in and register them, but sometimes when they go in and register in the treasurer's office, they don't go over to the appraiser's office and report the property there. So a lot of the time, I completely understand from the appraiser's standpoint, they're trying to track down who's got what and where is it. And I can't remember what the fiscal note, I mean, most of the fiscal note impact there is on your local governments, but it's distributed so much throughout the counties that I'm not sure it's a really big impact in any one specific county or area. So, yeah, we'll certainly take a look at that.
Thank you. And I do remember the question that I had, Mr. Chairman. So when we had the property valuation notice listing additional years, when we had that hearing in the Senate, Revenue was going to take a look at that. Do we know what happened? Were they able to, they were actually looking at a graph, putting a graph on that form that we receive. And I don't know if they were able to complete that. Yeah. So I was curious as where did we landed on that and how many years, because we had negotiated less years that was in the original bill, thinking that Revenue would get the graph. But if that didn't happen, I'd like to revisit where we're at on the number of years on that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and when we're dealing with some of the stuff that happened last year, I'm trying to jog my memory here because it seemed like there was a certain point for some counties that it's going to require two pages. They can fit it all on one page now, but I think if you went to 5 years, they were worried it might create 2 different pages there. But yeah, I can visit with the director because I remember he told me at one point with the software and everything that they've got available now, they can redesign that form and actually maybe show a visual graph on the increase year over year.
Yeah. That was the property valuation notice additional years.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is why the Senate landed, I think, at 3 years versus the original 5 years, was because of the 2-page issue. Yeah. So we were hoping the graph would solve it. The payment under protest, I don't know if you want to take a look at that again.
If I remember right, that was under current law, if you do a payment under protest or you protest at one point, speaking top level because I can't remember all the details, but basically protesting at one point disqualified you from protesting at a later point or vice versa. So this would just allow both of those options to happen. Okay. And then the one just above that, the residential real property, would you remind me what
Yes, it would allow different valuations to be used during the appeals process.
because currently, there's something that's disallowed? Is it like a private appraisal or maybe Eddie can help?
Currently, it's specific that the appraisals that can be used for this sort of appeal procedure have to be performed by a Kansas certified general real property appraiser. This would expand it only for residential parcels for them to be performed by Kansas certified residential real property appraisers.
So, and we would ask that you would consider the government competition piece. Yeah.
Any changes to that, or?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll
Okay.
take a look, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Or we'll take a look, all of us. Thank you. I don't want to speak for these guys. Yeah, I think that's all the provisions in that. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I know there's other provisions that we need to look at that, but that's a pretty good list for tonight for us to go home and do some homework.
Yes, I think so. And hopefully tomorrow we'll have some direction on how many bills we have, and we can kind of start putting these things into the CCR reports for each of those bills and move forward.
That'd be great.
Okay. Okay.
Do you want to try the income tax?
Sure.
Okay,
That's the short one, so it should be easy, right?
sure.
Is
Actually,
everybody still awake out there?
Yeah.
Got a few chuckles. Okay. Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll be honest, most of these things I think would really be kind of non-controversial. The salt parity, I just want to double check, I know when I was working with Department of Revenue, they said the Senate was working on the bill, so I kind of left that one alone. Do we know that's what the CPAs need for clarification on their end between the CPAs and the Department of Revenue? That is what we need to.
Thank you for Mr. Chairman. We did work with CPAs and the Department of Revenue to get that language, and all groups are in agreement.
Excellent. I love to hear that. Again, with the disallowed business interest, net operating loss, the Section 280C employment disallowances, the ERTC. We might do a little homework on that as far as their percentages, but then I think we can certainly move forward with that as a non-controversial item. I'll need to review that single city port authority. I remember doing that several years ago, and I'll just have to refresh my memory on that. But where that's just an extension, I don't know that there's any controversy around that piece. We're just extending that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we'll look at the HPIP transferability. We're not,
No, that's the one that's incorrect. Scratch
oh,
through
it's
that
the
one.
wrong title even.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Housing, transfer housing.
Oh, we need to take a look at this. We're really glad that you
Yes.
brought it up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
House Bill 2832, if you want to read the actual language.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad. We did have a bill that dealt with HPIP this year. And, yeah, we definitely want to leave that alone until next year, possibly. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The only other one would be that withholding tax penalty reduction out of Senate Bill 8. I think we both, even last year, we all agreed on that one. Pretty simple and straightforward. Okay. Okay. Anything else we need to discuss? Yes, 2832 had zero fiscal note. Madam Chair, I think that's all from the House side until I go back to my office and then I'll remember something I forgot. But I think we've covered a lot of work today, and it's always a pleasure working with you and getting a lot of things taken care of. I feel like we've got a good path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we do too, and I appreciate you and all the work of your team and our team, and I'm looking forward to the mega bill. Hopefully, we can finish up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, we do have this room reserved for the rest of the week from 11 to 5. So we've got some seating. Once we get to the tax relief bill, I think there might be a little bit of interest in that. But do you want to set a time at this point for tomorrow, or because we might see some bills get reassigned to conference at 10 o'clock, so we could potentially start some work on this.
Mr. Chairman, that would be great. I think that we should push forward as much as we possibly can to finish this out. So, yeah, as early as you want to meet, we'll be here.
Okay. I know it's a little vague. We did this last time, but we could do it upon adjournment of the second
Okay.
body tomorrow, or first recess, not
I know,
adjournment.
I
Yes.
said it. I know. Thank you.
First recess of the second chamber, I think is how they say that.
Okay.
So,
We'll try that. We just tend to interfere with ag doing that. Are you doing that tomorrow?
do you still have some conference work left? Okay.
So do we want to delay a half hour then in case, or?
I think that's what we're gonna do is upon first adjournment.
So
Okay, so we could do 30 minutes?
we'll do 30
past,
minutes
or
after the
roughly?
first recess.
Okay.
Of the second
Second
chamber. Wow. So glad. And please thank Leah for getting the room. This is great. So thank you too, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So we will see you in the morning.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.